Imagine the year 2026. A massive glass skyscraper rises from the Sahara, its sleek facade pulsing with glowing neon hieroglyphs. In this world, you are a subject of the 28th World Dynasty, living in an empire managed by an artificial intelligence trained on the ancient texts of the pharaohs. This version of history has no room for English, Mandarin, or Spanish. Global communication relies on a complex system of digital pictograms, and humanity draws its entire energy supply from a single source, the sun. This timeline was a physical possibility until a single strategic decision in the 7th century BC diverted it. At that time, Egypt was far from a global superpower. It was a fragmented, failing state, effectively a corpse being picked apart by rivals. The immediate threat is visible in these drawn bows. This relief depicts Assyrian archers, part of a massive imperial machine pressing in from the north. Simultaneously, Kushite forces invaded from the south, while local warlords fought over internal remnants. Egypt's traditional warrior caste, the Makimoi, had become a liability. They were highly respected and bound by ancient ritual, but they lacked the tactical evolution required to stand against the specialized, modern armies of their neighbors. The kingdom was suffering from a massive deficit in military technology. This created a power vacuum that invited total collapse, leaving the survival of the Egyptian identity in the hands of a single man. At the height of this crisis, the Oracle of Buto issued a cryptic prophecy. It predicted that salvation and revenge would come from the sea, brought by bronze men. When Ionian and Carian Greek pirates washed ashore shortly after, they arrived encased in heavy bronze armor, and advanced military hardware the Egyptians had never encountered in such a concentrated form. This is Pharaoh Psamtik I. Rather than executing these foreign raiders as intruders, he viewed them as a strategic acquisition. He bought their loyalty, turning the pirates into the crown's most valuable assets. Psamtik deployed these Greek hoplites as a tactical sledgehammer. Their disciplined formations allowed him to systematically crush domestic rivals and physically expel the Assyrian occupiers from Egyptian soil. By centralizing these foreign mercenaries, Psamtik created the world's first global military corporation. He secured a massive short-term victory for his reign, but he also introduced the specific element that would eventually render his own empire obsolete. This satellite view shows the western Nile Delta. Here, Psamtik granted the Greeks land to build Naucratis. It functioned as a free trade zone, but also a strategic quarantine. He wanted Greek military strength without their culture diluting the Egyptian mainland. Psamtik's interest in the Greeks was purely functional. He saw the heavy round shields and long spears of the phalanx as superior tools, essentially viewing the soldiers themselves as high-performance meat machines. This was a catastrophic cognitive error. He analyzed the Greeks as temporary hardware, mercenaries hired for a task, rather than recognizing their logic and organization as the underlying algorithm of the future. A more ambitious strategy was right in front of him: full integration. By merging the resource base of Africa with Aegean intellect and the logistics of the Nile, Psamtik could have forged a hybrid empire that dominated both the land and the sea. Instead, isolating the Greeks in Naucratis created the perfect environment for an intellectual leak. Thinkers like Pythagoras eventually entered Egypt to observe its inner workings, spending years studying Egyptian geometry, astronomy, and administrative systems. Because they were never assimilated, these scholars eventually returned home. They carried the foundational blueprints of Egyptian civilization across the Mediterranean to Athens. By failing to force these newcomers to become Egyptians, Psamtik's trade agreement facilitated the largest act of industrial espionage in history, providing the intellectual software the West would use to eventually surpass the East. The ripple effect was immediate. The knowledge extracted from the Nile Delta became the primary fuel for the golden age of Greece, transforming a collection of city-states into a global intellectual powerhouse. This momentum eventually culminated in the rise of the Roman Empire. Within centuries, the very civilization that had refined the Greeks' borrowed knowledge returned to Egypt, not as partners, but as conquerors who wiped the pharaohs off the map. If that knowledge had remained centralized in an Egyptian union, the technological timeline would have accelerated. Combining Greek theoretical mathematics with Egyptian hydraulic engineering could have industrialized the steam engine 2,000 years before the modern era. The world also lost a unique cultural synthesis. We might have seen a global civilization where the ancient cult of Osiris evolved into a massive industry of digital immortality, with human consciousness uploaded to glowing golden servers under the Giza Plateau. Psamtik successfully bought a century of peace for his kingdom, but by letting the Greeks walk away with the secrets of his civilization, he surrendered Egyptian supremacy for eternity. The collapse of the 26th dynasty reveals a fundamental reality of power. Physical strength is a temporary advantage. Long-term survival depends on maintaining an absolute monopoly on knowledge. When a civilization encounters a disruptive force or a superior technology, it enters a state of high-stakes evolution, a butterfly principle for the survival of states. The rule is binary. When faced with a force more advanced than your own culture, you must either absorb it entirely and make it yours, or you will eventually be erased by it. Psamtik chose a compromise. He attempted to use the technology of the Greeks while keeping their culture at arm's length, believing he could control the hardware without understanding the spirit behind it. In the modern world, that compromise is visible everywhere. It is the reason Egypt is currently a quiet destination for tourists, rather than the undisputed capital of the human race.